Welcome at Pizza and More. I saw that the pre-dough BIGA is very popular. I'm Jürgen and we make this time again a pizza dough with a pre-dough called BIGA, and we will make 100% BIGA. And I decided to use a Typo1 flour, which is a Type 1 flour. The Typo1 flour is comparable with a bread flour, which means from the amount of minerals in the flour. And you know, the higher the number from the Italian flour, so Typo 00, Typo 0, 1, 2, and then integrale, the higher the minerals or the amount of minerals in the flour. It is almost the same like somewhere else. We have at first the pastry flour, the all-purpose flour, then the bread flour, and so on. And there is always more mineral inside of the flour. This comes from milling, because if the number is higher and more minerals are in the flour, then they mill also the peel of the corn, of the wheat corn. And of course, this kind of flour is far healthier because of the higher amount of minerals. The Typo1 flour I use now is a very strong flour, which means it has a high baking strength. So the W value of this flour is 380. The baking strength, or this W value, tells us how long, over which period of time is or stays the gluten structure very stable before it breaks. So the higher the number, the more or the longer the gluten structure is very stable, which also means with a W value of 380, a short leavening time would be almost impossible, because then the dough might be really very, very hard, and it's not absolutely impossible, but it's almost impossible to stretch the pizza properly. Yeah, my flour I use right now has also 15% of protein, which is not normal for flour with a Typo1 or even for bread flour, because this flour has lots of minerals, and on the other side the protein is very low, because the protein sits in the center of the grain and not in the peel. In the peel there are the minerals. So therefore the mill added some additional protein, and that's the reason why we have 15% protein in this flour. And because of this high baking strength, I decided to make a 100% BIGA, because then the flour has a longer leavening time. But what does now 100% BIGA mean? 100% BIGA means that 100% of the flour sits already in the BIGA, so in the pre-dough, plus some or portion of water and the whole amount of yeast. And then when we create the main dough, we add the rest of the water and the salt. Yeah, and the advantage of a BIGA is the dough is very stable, the dough is very strong, it's super elastic, and of course the taste is also an amazing one. So I have now a Typo1 flour, which has normally lots of taste. I have a BIGA, therefore I really expect a very delicious crust, a very, let's say a taste explosion, because of all these positive factors. And as our flour has 15% protein and a really high baking strength, I thought 70% of hydration should be absolutely no problem. So we will make 70% of hydration, and the total leavening time will be 48 hours. So 24 hours for the BIGA at room temperature, and then the main dough also 24 hours, but partly in the fridge. And now I would say we start directly with our BIGA. The ingredients for the BIGA are 500 grams of Typo1 flour. As I already said, it has 15% protein and a W value of 380. Then I have here 2 grams of dry yeast. You may think, wow, 2 grams is a very high amount. Normally we could use less. This is the truth. But a BIGA needs more yeast compared to Polish, for example. And I have here 250 grams of cold water. It's not ice cold, it's simple cold. And you see 250 grams and 500 grams, which means the BIGA itself has a hydration of 50%. And now we make the BIGA. To create the BIGA, we need a bowl, or a bit better is such a dough ball box. Then at first we pour the water into our box. Then we shake it a bit so that the flour is distributed, and now we have two possibilities. Possibility number one is we dissolve the yeast now in our water. The problem is, or not a real problem, but it is that dry yeast is normally not dissolved in the water, but the dry yeast will be put directly to the flour. And this is exactly what we do today. We pour we put the yeast over our flour, then we shake a bit the flour so that the yeast is also a bit distributed here, and then we add the water. And then we start shaking our box to mix slowly and very gentle the yeast, the water and the flour. This is the so-called BIGA no stress. And this kind, or this way of creating the BIGA was founded from a Neapolitanian pizzaiolo called Roberto Susta, and they say he founded this way of making BIGA, and I believe it. And now we do this until all the loose flour is integrated. And if you have no success anymore with only shaking, then you could use the spatula and release at first everything which sticks to the side, and also everything which sticks to the bottom. And then we can use the spatula to flip the BIGA around. We don't need it, we only flip it around, and this now really until most of the flour, of the loose flour, is integrated. And then if this is done, so the result should be really lots of small pieces of dough. Then we take a container and then we fill the BIGA into the container. And you can see my container is also small enough. It could be easily a bit bigger, but okay, this is now the one I have. Now it's important to close the lid, but not airtight, which means I have here the possibility to let it a little bit open, which means here is free. BIGA needs to breathe. That's the reason why it should not be totally closed. And now I let it rest at room temperature for 16 to 24 hours. The BIGA was now good 24 hours at room temperature. The BIGA looks pretty good. It developed great. However, the BIGA won't get to the height. The BIGA won't double its volume. The BIGA stays very compact and very strong because there is so less water in the BIGA. Therefore, it stays really like one block. Now we make the main dough. For the main dough we need of course the whole BIGA, because in the BIGA we have already 100% of our flour, which was 500 grams. Then we have to add to the main dough the remaining water, which is 100 grams, so very cold water, because in some we have 350 grams of water. And of course we have 15 grams of fine sea salt. To make the BIGA, we take our BIGA out of the container. And we can break this big portion of BIGA into a bit smaller pieces. Then we can directly add the whole amount of salt. And already a bit of the water. not everything. And then we start mixing at a low speed. And then when this water is incorporated, then we continue with very little portions of water. And then we can add the last portion of water. And then, so for now I knead it at the lowest speed. Reason is, because as long we have a very low hydration, the warming of the dough would be very high. Therefore, lowest speed. And now, as all the water is in the dough, which is 70% hydration, we can increase the speed, and on a scale of 10 I increase it now to 3 to 5. And then I continue kneading until I'm able to make the window test. After 20 minutes kneading, the dough is ready kneaded. I took already out a piece of dough to make this window test. Therefore, I stretch the dough. And you can see I'm able to stretch the dough very thin, which means the dough is ready and I can take it out of the machine. And then we have to make, when the dough is on our counter, several times stretch and fold. As you can see, the dough is very sticky. Therefore, it's really the easiest to take some olive oil, at first in your hand, then on top of the dough, and then you can always take the dough from the left and from the right, lift it up, put it back onto the counter, stretch it and fold it over. And then we are going to do this several times. And then also you can see how the dough gets structure. And then when the surface is already nice and strong, we can turn the dough a bit and pull it, and then we have a nice structure on top. You can already see some air bubbles. Then we take the dough and put the dough into a dough ball box. Then of course we have to close the lid. Then we let it rest at room temperature for around about 1 hour. And then we put it into the fridge for 12 hours. I had the dough now 12 hours in the fridge. Yeah, if you may wonder regarding my voice, I have a cold suddenly, and that's the reason why my voice changed a bit. But I hope you are able to understand me. And you may wonder why I had a leavening time right now for 12 hours for the main dough. And not why I've not shaped the dough balls directly after we made the dough. This is pretty simple. I think if we bring now fresh oxygen to our dough, so after a leavening time of 12 hours, the dough or the yeast and the microorganism get more oxygen again, and that is good for the activity of the yeast. That's the reason. I made once a video where I compared the different times. Once I made the dough balls directly after kneading, after an hour, after 12 hours and so on. And there you can see that really the baking result at the end is different. If you have mozzarella which is in liquid, then please take the mozzarella right now out of the liquid. Cut the mozzarella into slices, put the mozzarella into a sieve, then all the liquid which is in the cheese can drain out, and so we avoid that we have afterwards all that liquid on our pizza. Here we have now our pizza dough. It is directly out of the fridge, and now we take the dough out of the box. And now we make 3 pieces with the same weight of each. Each of the dough balls has now the same weight. It is 290 grams. And now for shaping the dough balls, we take one of those doughs, and then you can always pull the dough from the side to the bottom and towards the center. and then I push it always into the center of the bottom. And then you can see how the surface of this dough ball gets stretched. And then we guarantee that the bottom is nicely closed. This is required that the dough ball is not running flat. And then we put the dough ball back into the box. Another method of shaping those dough balls is the same what we did with the big dough ball. We do this stretch and fold, which means we take it from the left and from the right, lift it, put it back, stretch it and fold it over. This is very good if the dough is a bit more sticky. You also could use olive oil in your fingers, of course. And then we do the same like we did with the big dough ball as well. We turn the dough and we pull it, and then you can see how the surface of the dough gets strengthened. Also here we have to check, is the bottom closed? And then the dough ball is ready. And the third possibility, if your hands are enough, you only can put the hand on your dough and then you start circling, and then you also can see that we get a nice dough ball. I go always here with these fingertips underneath, and then if the dough ball is nice, then we turn it around, check that the bottom is closed, and the dough ball is ready. When then all three dough balls are shaped, or all the dough balls are shaped, we have to close the lid, because this prevents our dough from drying out. And now we let the dough, or we put the dough balls directly back into the fridge, and round about 4 hours before baking, we take them out of the fridge. And once again, everything is prepared for baking a pizza. I have everything, as I said, the San Marzano tomatoes, 1 can San Marzano tomatoes has 4 grams. 1 can of San Marzano tomatoes has 400 grams. And here I have added 4 grams of fine sea salt. Of course, if you want, you can also add some olive oil and some fresh basil, but I will put the olive oil and the basil later onto the pizza, so it's for me not required to have it in the tomato sauce. If you want to cook your tomato sauce with garlic or with any other herbs like oregano or whatever, please feel free, prepare your tomato sauce like you want. I have also here mozzarella fior di latte. This is the cheese I would prefer. If you want to have some other cheese, please feel free. I have here also fresh basil, olive oil, Parmesan cheese. You see, everything is well prepared. And now we start with the pizza. Here you can see the dough balls. They look really fantastic. So we add at first enough semolina onto the dough ball. Then we release the dough ball everywhere where it's attached, either to another dough ball or to the side. And then we push some semolina under, and then we take the dough ball out and put it into semolina. Then of course we close the lid to protect the other dough balls from drying out. Then we flip this dough ball in the semolina, then we take it out onto our counter, and if the dough ball is not round, then we have now the possibility to make a round shape, very gentle, only with the fingertips, and then we start pressing the air from the center towards the crust. The pizza doesn't have its final size right now. We will stretch the pizza at the end. Here we have the tomatoes. Then we add some fresh grated Parmesan cheese. As next, some fresh basil. Then the fior di latte. In my case, I have mozzarella fior di latte. And here you can see the mozzarella fior di latte is typically cut it into sticks, and the normal mozzarella is traditionally cut it into slices. That's the reason why I said earlier, if you have mozzarella, then cut the mozzarella into slices. Then, of course, some olive oil. And then is the pizza ready for the pizza peel, which means we put some semolina onto the peel, we lift the dough, and then we push the peel under. And now we stretch the pizza to its final size. And then it's time for the oven. The oven is preheated to 420 degrees Celsius. Then we add some fresh basil. And then I would say we cut into this pizza. And please have a look. Here you can see how full of air this fantastic pizza is. And now again I have the pleasure to taste this pizza. It smells really fantastic. At first, as always, I taste the center. And you really can believe me, this center tastes so good. As most of the times. And now the crust, because in the crust is the most of the taste if you talk about dough. And yes, of course, it's really the case. This crust has also a fantastic taste. Reason for this is, of course, we have 48 hours leavening time in some. We have a Typo1 flour, which has lots of taste from itself, and we made BIGA. If you are very interested maybe in knowing something more about flour, about the W value, when to use which kind of flour, what's the sense of the protein and so on, in this video I will show and I will explain you lots of things regarding flour. Yeah, if you like my video, it would be fantastic if you would subscribe my channel. And then we see us also in the next video. Ciao.